What kind of woman helps a Hell's Angel when she can barely survive herself? A woman stood in the rain with just $19 in her hand and gave it away to save a stranger everyone else walked past. She thought she lost everything that night. But the next morning, the sound of 450 engines outside her home proved she had just stepped into something far bigger than she ever imagined, and there was no turning back. The rain didn't fall in drops that night. It poured like it had something to prove. Behind the Walmart on the edge of Houston, the parking lot stretched out under flickering fluorescent lights, each one buzzing like it was on its last breath. Puddles had formed in the cracks of the asphalt, reflecting broken pieces of neon from the store sign above. The air smelled like wet concrete, gasoline, and something faintly metallic. Danielle Brooks stood just outside the glow of the entrance, her thin jacket already soaked through. Water dripped from the ends of her braids, ran down her neck, and disappeared beneath the collar of her shirt. But she didn't move. In her hand, she held $19. 3 crumpled bills and a few coins pressed tight in her palm like they might disappear if she loosened her grip. She stared at them longer than she needed to, like they could somehow multiply if she wished hard enough. $19. That was it. Her entire world, reduced to something that could barely cover a cheap meal and a bus ride. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging faintly in the cool air, and looked out across the empty lot. It was late, close to midnight, and most of the cars had already cleared out. Just a few scattered vehicles remained, their windshields streaked with rain, engines cold. Danielle shifted her weight, her sneakers squelching softly against the pavement. There was a hole in the sole of her left shoe, and she could feel the cold water pressing through it, soaking her sock. She barely noticed anymore. She had gotten used to things like that. The small discomforts, the constant calculating, the quiet fear that lived in the back of her mind, whispering that one wrong step, one unexpected expense, could send everything crashing down. She glanced back at the store, then down at the money again. $19. Enough to stretch if she was careful. Enough to make it through tomorrow if nothing went wrong. But something always went wrong. A car door slammed somewhere across the lot, sharp and sudden. Danielle looked up. That's when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not the hum of lights, not the distant rumble of traffic, not the rain. A gasp. Short, ragged, desperate. She turned toward the far edge of the lot, where the lights thinned out and shadows pooled between the parked vehicles. At first, she didn't see anything, just darkness and rain cutting through it in silver streaks. Then she saw him. A man, huge, easily 6'3", maybe more, standing beside a chrome motorcycle that gleamed faintly under the weak light. He wore a black leather vest, soaked and heavy against his frame, patches stitched across the back and shoulders. Even from where she stood, Danielle recognized the emblem, a skull with wings, Hell's Angels. Her stomach tightened. Everyone knew what that meant. Danger, trouble, the kind of people you didn't get involved with. The man staggered. One hand went to his chest, fingers curling into the leather, like he was trying to hold himself together. His face twisted, the muscles tightening in pain, and then he dropped. One knee hit the pavement first, hard enough that Danielle flinched just watching it. The other followed, and then his entire body slumped forward, catching himself awkwardly before collapsing onto his side. The sound he made this time was worse. Not just a gasp, a fight, a struggle to pull air into lungs that weren't cooperating. Danielle froze. Every instinct in her body told her to stay exactly where she was. Don't move. Don't get involved. Just walk away. "Hey!" The shout came from behind her. She turned. The gas station attendant, white guy, maybe mid-30s, leaning against the doorway with a cigarette between his fingers, was watching the scene unfold with narrowed eyes. He flicked ash onto the wet concrete and shook his head. "Don't even think about it," he called out, his voice carrying over the rain. "Those guys? They're nothing but trouble." Danielle looked back at the man on the ground. He wasn't moving right. His chest, she watched it, focusing hard, was barely rising. Each breath looked like it cost him something. His lips had started to change color, turning a faint, unnatural shade. Blue. "He needs help," she said, almost to herself. The attendant let out a dry laugh. "Yeah? And you think that's your problem?" he shot back. "Lady, trust me, you don't want to touch that." Danielle swallowed. Her fingers tightened around the money in her hand. $19. Her last $19. She looked at it again, then back at the man. He made another sound, softer this time, weak, like whatever strength he had left was slipping away. The rain kept falling. The lights kept buzzing. The world didn't stop. No one ran over. No one called out. No one moved. It was just her and him. Danielle felt something twist in her chest, sharp and familiar. A memory. A hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and quiet desperation. A voice telling her it was too late, because no one had acted fast enough, because help hadn't come when it mattered. Her jaw tightened. She looked down at the money one last time. $19. If she walked away, she'd keep it. She'd have breakfast. She'd have a little breathing room. She'd survive tomorrow. If she stayed, she'd lose everything she had left. Danielle closed her eyes for a brief second. Then she opened them and ran. Her shoes slapped against the wet pavement, each step splashing through shallow puddles as she crossed the empty stretch of parking lot. The rain hit harder now, stinging her face, blurring her vision, but she didn't slow down. The man was still on the ground when she reached him. Up close, he looked even worse. His skin had gone pale beneath the rough gray beard, almost waxy under the flickering light. Rain soaked into his leather vest, darkening it, clinging to his massive frame. His chest rose unevenly, shallow and strained, like his body had forgotten how to breathe properly. "Hey! Hey, can you hear me?" Danielle dropped to her knees beside him, the cold water immediately soaking through her jeans. His eyes fluttered. For a second, she thought he wasn't going to respond at all. Then they opened just barely, revealing a faded blue that seemed unfocused, distant. He tried to speak. Nothing came out but a broken wheeze. Danielle swallowed hard. "Stay with me, okay? Just stay with me," she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to keep it steady. Behind her, she could feel eyes watching, judging. The gas station attendant hadn't gone inside. He stood in the doorway, cigarette still in hand, like this was some kind of late-night show. "You're wasting your time," he called out. "Guy probably messed himself up. Happens all the time." Danielle ignored him. She leaned closer, trying to see if the man was still breathing. His chest barely moved. His hand twitched weakly against the pavement. This wasn't something small. This wasn't something that would fix itself. Her heart started pounding harder. She needed help. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers slipping against the wet screen as she tried to unlock it. The battery icon blinked red, barely alive. "No, no, no," she muttered under her breath. She hit 911. The call rang once, twice, then the line cracked and dropped. Danielle stared at the screen in disbelief. "No signal," she whispered. The rain seemed louder suddenly. The parking lot felt bigger, emptier. She looked up toward the gas station. "Hey!" she shouted. "Call an ambulance!" The attendant shrugged, taking another drag from his cigarette before flicking it aside. "I'll get to it," he said lazily. "No rush?" Danielle's jaw tightened. No rush? She repeated, disbelief cutting through her fear. He's dying. The man on the ground let out another shallow, strained breath, his fingers curling weakly as if trying to grab onto something that wasn't there. Danielle looked down at him again, and something inside her shifted. This wasn't just some stranger. Not anymore. This was a moment. One of those moments that split your life into before and after. She knew that feeling. She had lived it once before. The memory came fast and sharp. A waiting room, harsh fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic and something sour underneath it. Danielle had been younger then, sitting in a stiff plastic chair with her hands clenched together, watching a clock that refused to move. Her mother had been behind those doors, alive when they brought her in. Struggling, but alive. They had asked about insurance, about deposits, about paperwork. Time had passed. Too much time. By the time someone finally rushed her mother into surgery, it was already slipping away. Danielle still remembered the doctor's face when he came out. That careful, practiced expression, the kind that told you everything before he even opened his mouth. She didn't make it. Just like that. Because help didn't come fast enough. Because people hesitated. Because someone somewhere decided it wasn't urgent. Danielle had never forgotten that. Never. The present snapped back into place with the sound of another strained breath. She looked at the man in front of her. His lips were darker now, his body weaker. And suddenly, there was no question left. Danielle pushed herself up to her feet. "I'll be right back," she said quickly, even though she wasn't sure he could hear her. Then she ran. The gas station door burst open as she rushed inside, the bell above it ringing sharply. The air inside was warmer, smelling of stale coffee and cheap snacks. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright after the darkness outside. She moved straight to the counter. "Call 911 now," she said, her voice firm, urgent. "He's having a heart attack." The attendant sighed like she had just asked him for a favor instead of a life. "I told you, I'll handle it," he said, reaching lazily for the phone. Danielle didn't wait to see if he actually dialed. She turned and scanned the shelves. Medicine. Where? There. A small rack near the register. Aspirin. Water bottles. Her feet carried her forward before her mind could catch up. She grabbed the first bottle of aspirin she saw, then a bottle of water, her hands moving fast, almost mechanical. For a second, she hesitated. Her fingers brushed the money still clutched in her hand. $19. Her stomach tightened. This was it. Once she spent it, there was no backup, no second chance. Tomorrow would come, and she would have nothing. No breakfast, no safety, no cushion. Just the same empty feeling she had been fighting for months. Behind her, the door opened again as someone walked in, laughing about something on their phone, completely unaware of what was happening outside. The world kept moving, like it always did. Danielle closed her eyes for half a second. Then she stepped up to the counter and slammed the items down. "How much?" she asked. The attendant glanced at them, then back at her. $6.50. She didn't argue, didn't hesitate. She uncurled her fingers and placed the money on the counter. All of it. The bills stuck slightly from the rain as he picked them up, counting slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He slid the change back toward her. $1.50. Danielle didn't even look at it. She grabbed the aspirin and water and ran back out into the rain. The man was still there. Still fighting. But weaker now. Danielle dropped to her knees beside him again, her breath coming fast. Hey, I'm back," she said quickly, her voice softer now, steadier. She twisted open the aspirin bottle, shaking 2 tablets into her palm. "Listen to me, okay? You gotta chew these." His eyes flickered toward her, confused, distant. She lifted his head gently, supporting it with one hand. "Come on," she urged. "Stay with me." She placed the tablets on his tongue, then brought the water to his lips. "Drink." He swallowed slowly, painfully, each movement looking like it took everything he had. "That's it," she whispered. "You're doing good. Just stay with me." His hand moved again. Weak. Searching. Until it found hers. His grip was barely there, but it was enough. Enough to tell her he was still fighting. Danielle held on to him, her fingers wrapping around his, grounding him in that moment. In the distance, faint at first, then growing louder. Sirens. Relief hit her so suddenly it almost made her dizzy. "Help's coming," she said, her voice breaking just a little. "You're gonna be okay." The man's eyes met hers for a brief second, and for the first time there was something there. Awareness. Recognition. His lips moved. A whisper. So quiet she almost missed it. "Don't let me die." Danielle tightened her grip. "I won't," she said firmly. "I got you." The sirens grew louder, closer, and then the low rumble of another engine cut through the sound. Different. Deeper. A motorcycle. Danielle looked up. Headlights sliced through the rain as a bike pulled hard into the lot, tires hissing against the wet pavement. A younger man jumped off before it even fully stopped, his boots hitting the ground as he ran toward them. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice sharp with panic. "Hawk!" Danielle blinked. "Hawk?" The man dropped to his knees on the other side, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. Then he looked at Danielle, really looked at her soaked clothes, her shaking hands, the empty bottle beside her, and the man whose life she was holding together. "You," he said slowly, disbelief creeping into his voice. "You helped him?" Danielle didn't answer right away. She just nodded once, her focus still on the man in front of her. The stranger let out a breath like he didn't know he'd been holding, and the way he looked at her then, it wasn't suspicion, it wasn't judgment, it was something else. Something heavier. Like he had just witnessed something he didn't expect to see. The sirens screamed into the lot as the ambulance pulled up, lights flashing red and blue across the wet pavement. But Danielle barely noticed, because in that moment, she had no idea. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. And somewhere deep in her chest, a quiet question started to form. What had she just stepped into? The ambulance lights painted everything in flashes of red and blue, cutting through the rain like something unreal. Paramedics moved fast, efficient, focused, kneeling beside the man they had called Hawk. One of them placed an oxygen mask over his face while another checked his pulse, speaking in low, urgent tones Danielle couldn't fully make out. She stayed where she was for a moment, still kneeling on the cold pavement, her hand lingering where his had just been. It felt strange pulling away, like letting go of something that had tied her to that moment. "You can step back, ma'am," one of the paramedics said gently, glancing at her. "We've got him." Danielle nodded, pushing herself to her feet. Her legs felt stiff, heavy, like they didn't quite belong to her anymore. The adrenaline that had carried her this far was starting to fade, leaving behind a deep, hollow exhaustion. She stepped back slowly, water dripping from her clothes, her arms hanging at her sides. The younger biker, Cole, she realized now from the way he'd called out earlier, hovered close to the stretcher. His hands moved restlessly, running through his wet hair, then dropping to his sides, then lifting again like he didn't know what to do with them. "Is he gonna make it?" Cole asked, his voice tight, barely controlled. One of the paramedics glanced up. "We've got him stable for now, but he needs to get to the hospital, fast." Cole swallowed hard, nodding. Then he looked at Danielle again. Not just a quick glance this time, a real look, like he was trying to understand her. "You stayed," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Danielle shrugged faintly, suddenly aware of how small she must look standing there in soaked clothes and worn-out shoes. "He needed help," she replied simply. Cole let out a short breath, something close to a laugh, but without any humor in it. "Most people don't see it that way," he said. Danielle didn't respond. She didn't know what to say to that. Because he wasn't wrong. She had seen it herself just minutes ago. People walking away, looking the other direction, pretending not to notice. The paramedics lifted Hawk onto the stretcher. His hand slipped from the side, fingers brushing briefly against Danielle's sleeve as they moved him. For a second, she froze. Then one of them adjusted his arm, securing it in place. "Let's go!" another paramedic called. They pushed the stretcher toward the ambulance, wheels rattling softly over the uneven pavement. Cole followed close behind, then suddenly stopped. He turned back, walked straight toward Danielle. Up close, she could see more details now. He was younger than she'd first thought, early 30s maybe. His leather vest was worn, patches stitched onto it like pieces of a story she didn't understand. Rain ran down his face, but his eyes were sharp, focused, serious. "You got a name?" he asked. Danielle hesitated for just a second. "Danielle," she said. "Danielle Brooks." He nodded slowly, like committing it to memory. "Danielle," he repeated. "I'm Cole." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small, plain card. White. Minimal. No flashy design. He held it out to her. She looked at it but didn't take it right away. "What is this?" she asked. "Just take it," he said quietly. There was something in his tone. Not pushy. Not aggressive, but insistent. Danielle reached out and took the card. It was heavier than she expected, thick paper, smooth edges. On the front, there was a small emblem, a crown with wings spread wide. Beneath it, a phone number. No name, no company, nothing else. She frowned slightly, looking back up at him. "Why are you giving me this?" Cole held her gaze. "Because," he said slowly, "when he wakes up, he's gonna want to find you." Danielle blinked. "Find me?" He nodded. "You did something tonight most people wouldn't," he said. "He doesn't forget things like that." She let out a quiet breath, shaking her head a little. "I didn't do anything special." Cole's expression shifted, just slightly. Something like disbelief flickered across his face. "Yeah," he said. "You did." The ambulance doors slammed shut behind him, cutting the moment short. One of the paramedics leaned out. "You coming or not?" Cole glanced back, then at Danielle one last time. "Call that number tomorrow," he said. "Please." There was something in the way he said please. Not casual, not optional, almost urgent. Then he turned and jogged toward the ambulance, climbing inside just before the doors closed again. The sirens came back to life, loud, sharp, and then the ambulance pulled away, disappearing into the night, red and blue lights fading into the distance. The rain kept falling. The parking lot fell quiet again. Too quiet. Danielle stood there, the card still in her hand, staring at the empty space where the ambulance had been. Behind her, the gas station door creaked open. The attendant stepped out again, arms crossed, watching the scene like it had all been some kind of inconvenience. "Crazy night, huh?" he muttered. Danielle didn't answer. She was somewhere else now. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally. She looked down at her hand. The card. The crown with wings. She turned it over. Blank. No explanation. No context. Just a number. Her fingers tightened slightly around it. What kind of people carry something like this? She whispered to herself. The attendant snorted. People you don't want to owe, he said. That got her attention. She looked back at him. Oh? She repeated. He shrugged. You helped one of them. That means something, whether you like it or not. Danielle's stomach tightened. I didn't do it for anything, she said quickly. The attendant raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Doesn't matter, he replied. World doesn't work like that. Danielle looked back out into the empty lot. The rain had softened now, falling in a steady rhythm against the pavement. She could still see the spot where Hawk had been lying, still feel the weight of his hand in hers, still hear his voice, weak, desperate. Don't let me die. Her chest tightened again, and suddenly another memory crept in. Not the hospital this time, but the phone call. She had been standing in her kitchen, holding a cheap cordless phone, listening as someone on the other end explained what had happened. Her mother had waited too long. No one had stepped in. No one had pushed. No one had made it urgent. Danielle had stood there, frozen, hearing the words, but not understanding them. Until she did. And when she did, it had changed everything. The way she saw people. The way she saw moments like this. You don't get a second chance to choose. You either act, or you live with it. Danielle let out a slow breath, the present settling back in around her. She looked down at her other hand. Empty now. The $19, gone. All of it. Her stomach gave a quiet, hollow reminder of what that meant. Tomorrow would come, and she would have nothing. No safety net. No backup plan. Just the consequences of a choice she couldn't undo. The attendant had gone back inside. The lights buzzed overhead. The rain kept falling. Danielle slipped the card into her jacket pocket. Then she turned and started walking home. Each step felt heavier than the last. The cold had settled deep into her bones now, her clothes clinging to her skin, her shoes squishing softly with every movement. The streets were mostly empty. A distant car passed by, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Somewhere a dog barked. Otherwise it was just her, and the sound of her own footsteps. She reached into her pocket again, pulling out the change the attendant had given her. $1.50. That was all she had left. Danielle stared at the coins in her palm as she walked, the streetlights casting long shadows ahead of her. A quiet laugh escaped her. Not because anything was funny, but because the reality of it all had finally settled in. She had spent her last $19 on a stranger. A stranger everyone else had walked away from. A stranger she might never see again. She closed her hand around the coins, tight, as if holding on to them could somehow make sense of everything. What did you just do, Danielle? She whispered. No answer came, just the steady rhythm of rain, and the distant echo of sirens fading into the night. Somewhere ahead, the dim outline of her apartment building came into view. Old, worn, familiar. A place that had never felt like much, but tonight felt like everything. She kept walking, because there was nothing else to do, and no way to turn back. By the time Danielle reached her apartment building, the rain had softened into a steady drizzle, tapping lightly against the cracked sidewalk and rusted railings. The building stood the same as always, aged brick, chipped paint, a flickering light above the entrance that never quite stayed on. Home, if you could call it that. She climbed the narrow steps, her legs aching now that the rush of adrenaline had fully worn off. Every step felt heavier than the last, like her body was finally catching up to everything that had just happened. The hallway smelled faintly of damp carpet and old cooking oil. The overhead light buzzed softly, casting a pale yellow glow that barely reached the corners. Danielle pushed open the door to apartment 2B. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. A small lamp in the corner cast a warm but dim light across the room. The couch, old, sagging in the middle, sat where it always had. A thin blanket was draped over one side. Marcus was there, curled slightly forward, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing in particular. The television was on, but the volume was low. Just a faint murmur of voices filling the silence. He looked up the moment she stepped in. "You're late," he said, his voice calm but edged with something else. Concern, maybe, or just habit. Danielle closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a second longer than necessary. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Work ran late." It wasn't a complete lie. Marcus studied her for a moment. His eyes moved over her soaked jacket, her wet shoes, the way her hands hung loosely at her sides. "You look like hell," he said. She gave a tired half-smile. "Feel like it too." He nodded once, accepting that answer, but not entirely convinced. "You eat?" he asked. Danielle hesitated, just for a second. Then she shook her head. "I grabbed something earlier," she said. Another lie. Small, necessary. Marcus leaned back against the couch, exhaling slowly. "Good," he said. "We got not much left anyway." Danielle's chest tightened. She walked past him into the kitchen area, a small space barely separated from the living room. She opened the cabinet. Empty, except for a single can of beans pushed to the back. She opened the fridge, a half-empty carton of milk. Nothing else. She closed it gently. Her reflection in the dull metal surface stared back at her. Tired eyes, damp hair clinging to her face, shoulders slumped under the weight of a day that hadn't gone the way she'd planned. $19. Gone. She reached into her pocket and pulled out what was left. $1.50. She set the coins on the counter, the small clink sounding louder than it should have in the quiet apartment. Behind her, Marcus shifted. "You sure you ate?" he asked again, more carefully this time. Danielle turned back to him. "I said I'm good," she replied, a little sharper than she intended. Silence settled between them. Marcus nodded slowly, not pushing it. He had learned that lesson a long time ago. Danielle took off her jacket, hanging it over the back of a chair. Water dripped onto the floor, forming a small puddle beneath it. She walked over and sat on the edge of the couch, her body sinking slightly into the worn cushion. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The television continued its quiet hum. Rain tapped softly against the window. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "You look like something happened," he said. Danielle stared at her hands. She could still feel it. The weight of Hawk's hand in hers. The way his grip had tightened just slightly when she told him to stay with her. The sound of his voice. "Don't let me die." She swallowed. "There was a guy," she said slowly, "at the Walmart parking lot." Marcus's posture shifted instantly, his attention snapping fully to her. "What kind of guy?" Danielle let out a breath. "Big," she said. "Biker. Hell's Angels." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You serious?" She nodded. "He went down. Chest. Something was wrong. He couldn't breathe." Marcus sat up straighter now. "And you, you called someone?" Danielle hesitated. Then she shook her head. "No signal," she said. "Phone died." "So what did you do?" Danielle looked at him, really looked at him. I helped him, she said. Marcus blinked. You what? I bought aspirin, water, tried to keep him awake until the ambulance came. Marcus stared at her like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. You helped a Hell's Angel? He repeated. Danielle shrugged faintly. I helped a man who was dying. Marcus let out a slow breath, running a hand over his face. Danielle, he said, his voice lower now. Those guys, they're not just random people. I know, she said quietly. Do you? He shot back. Not harsh, but firm. You don't get mixed up with people like that. Not if you can help it. Danielle looked away. I didn't have time to think about all that, she said. He needed help. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice dropping. And what did it cost you? The question hung in the air. Heavy, unavoidable. Danielle didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. Marcus's eyes drifted toward the kitchen counter. The coins, $1, 50 cents. His expression changed, subtly, but enough. You used it, he said quietly. Danielle nodded. All of it. Marcus leaned back slowly, his jaw tightening as he processed that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of it settled in. The reality, no money, no backup, nothing left. Marcus let out a long breath, staring at the ceiling. Damn, he muttered. Danielle braced herself. For anger. For frustration. For the kind of reaction most people would have. But when Marcus looked back at her, what she saw instead caught her off guard. Not anger, not disappointment, just something quieter. You couldn't walk away, huh? He said. Danielle shook her head. No, she whispered. Marcus studied her for a second longer. Then he nodded. Yeah, he said softly. I figured. Danielle blinked. You're not mad? He shrugged. What's the point? He said. You already made the choice. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Marcus leaned forward again, resting his forearms on his knees. Look, he said. We'll figure it out. We always do. Danielle felt something shift in her chest, a small piece of the weight lifting. Not gone, but lighter. Yeah, she said quietly. We will. Marcus nodded, then stood up slowly. I'm gonna crash, he said. You should too. Danielle watched him disappear down the short hallway toward his room. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence returned. Deeper now. Danielle sat there for a while, staring at the coins on the counter. Then, slowly, she reached into her jacket pocket again. The card. She pulled it out, holding it under the dim light. The crown with wings. Simple. Clean. Mysterious. She turned it over again. Still blank. Just the number. Call that number tomorrow. Cole's voice echoed in her mind. Please. Danielle stared at the card for a long moment. Her fingers traced the edge of it, feeling the smooth surface. What are you? She whispered. What kind of world had she stepped into tonight? What kind of people gave out cards like this? And why did it feel like it mattered? She leaned back against the couch, her head resting against the worn cushion. The exhaustion finally hit her all at once, heavy, unforgiving. But even as her eyes began to close, her mind wouldn't quiet. The man's face, his voice, the way Cole had looked at her, the way everything had shifted in just a few minutes. Danielle tightened her grip on the card. Tomorrow. She'd think about it tomorrow. Because tonight, There was nothing left to give, nothing left to decide. Only the quiet, steady question lingering in the back of her mind. Had she just made the biggest mistake of her life? Or the one decision that would change everything? Danielle didn't get much sleep. The night passed in fragments, short, restless stretches of unconsciousness broken by flashes of memory. The rain, the parking lot, the weight of a stranger's hand gripping hers, like it was the last thing tethering him to this world. And that voice. Don't let me die. By the time her alarm went off at 5 a.m., she was already awake, staring at the ceiling as the faint gray light of morning crept through the thin curtains. For a moment, she didn't move. Then reality came rushing back. The money. Gone. Her stomach tightened before she even sat up. Danielle pushed herself off the couch slowly, her body stiff, her head heavy. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of early morning traffic outside. She walked into the kitchen, opened the cabinet. Nothing had changed. She opened the fridge. Still the same. Half a carton of milk. Nothing else. She let out a quiet breath, closing it again. Behind her, Marcus's door creaked open. He stepped out, rubbing his eyes, his hair still messy from sleep. He looked at her, then at the kitchen. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He glanced at the counter, then at her face. "You good?" he asked. Danielle nodded automatically. "Yeah." Another small lie. Marcus didn't call her on it this time. He walked past her, grabbed the milk, poured what was left into a chipped mug, and took a sip. He didn't say anything about the emptiness, didn't comment on what was missing. He didn't need to. They both knew. "We'll figure something out today," he said after a moment. Danielle nodded again. "Yeah," she replied. "We will." But as she turned away, her hand brushed against her jacket hanging on the chair. The card. She pulled it out. The same smooth surface. The same crown with wings. And that number. She stared at it again, longer this time. "Call that number tomorrow." "Please." Cole's voice echoed in her mind, steady and certain. Danielle frowned slightly. Why had he said it like that? Not like a suggestion, like a request that mattered, like something important depended on it. Marcus noticed the card in her hand. "What's that?" he asked. Danielle hesitated, then held it up slightly. "The guy from last night," she said. "One of them gave it to me." Marcus's expression shifted immediately. "Danielle?" "I know," she cut in. "I know how it looks." He stepped closer, taking the card from her hand and examining it. "No name?" he said. "No business? Just a number?" She nodded. "That's what I said." Marcus turned it over, then handed it back. "That's not normal," he muttered. Danielle gave a faint smile. Nothing about last night was normal. Marcus studied her for a second. "You gonna call it?" Danielle didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the card. The number felt heavier than it should have. Like dialing it would mean stepping into something she didn't understand, something she might not be able to step out of. "I don't know," she admitted. Marcus leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Look," he said, choosing his words carefully. "You did a good thing, no question. But people like that? They don't just hand out numbers for no reason." Danielle nodded slowly. "I know. So if you call," he continued, "you gotta be ready for whatever comes with it." She looked up at him. "And if I don't?" Marcus shrugged. "Then maybe nothing happens," he said. "Maybe you just go back to this." He gestured around the apartment, the worn furniture, the empty kitchen, the quiet struggle that filled every corner. Danielle swallowed, going back to this, like nothing had happened. Like that moment in the parking lot hadn't changed something inside her. She slipped the card back into her pocket. "I've got work," she said. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, me too." They moved around each other in the small space, getting ready in silence. Danielle pulled on a dry shirt, grabbed her bag, and paused at the door. Her hand rested on the knob. For a second, she almost reached for the card again. Almost. But instead, she opened the door and stepped out into the morning. The city looked different in daylight. The same streets, the same buildings, but without the cover of night, everything felt more exposed, more real. Danielle walked the few blocks to the bus stop, her mind drifting back to the night before over and over again. The man's face, Cole's voice, the card. She slid her hand into her pocket again, feeling it there. Still real, still waiting. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes, and she climbed on, dropping her last dollar into the fare box. $1, 50 cents left. She sat near the back, staring out the window as the city moved past, in a blur of concrete and morning light. At work, nothing had changed, and yet everything had. She folded laundry at the laundromat the same way she always did, mechanically, efficiently, towels, shirts, sheets, but her mind wasn't there. It kept drifting. Back to that number, back to the question she couldn't shake. Around noon, she stepped outside for a break. The sun had broken through the clouds, warming the pavement, drying the last traces of rain. She reached into her pocket again, pulled out the card, stared at it. Her thumb hovered over her phone. Call, don't. Her phone buzzed. Danielle flinched slightly, glancing down. Unknown number. Her heart skipped. For a second, she just stared at it. Then it stopped. A voicemail notification appeared. She hesitated, then tapped it. "Danielle." Cole's voice came through, clear and calm. "It's Cole, from last night." Her breath caught. "We need to talk," he continued. "Hawk's awake. He's asking about you." Danielle felt her chest tighten. "He remembers?" she whispered. "He remembers everything," Cole said on the recording, "and he wants to see you." There was a pause, then, "Please call me back." The message ended. Silence. Danielle stood there, the phone still pressed to her ear, her heart beating faster than it had any right to. Hawk was awake, and he remembered her. She looked down at the card again, then at the phone. Her thumb hovered over the screen. This was it. The moment Marcus had warned her about. The step she couldn't undo. If she called, everything might change. If she didn't, she could walk away, pretend it never happened, go back to her life, her struggle, her quiet, predictable survival. Danielle closed her eyes, took a breath. Then she pressed the call button. The line rang once, twice, then clicked. "Danielle?" Cole's voice came through immediately. Her throat tightened. "Yeah," she said softly. "It's me." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then, "Thank God," Cole said. "Can you meet me today?" Danielle glanced around, suddenly aware of how normal everything looked around her. People walking, cars passing, the world continuing like nothing had changed. "Where?" she asked. "I'll text you the address," he said. "It's a diner on 5th Street, 3 o'clock. Danielle swallowed. "Why?" she asked quietly. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Cole spoke, his voice lower. "Because you need to understand who you saved," he said. Danielle felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, Not exactly. Something else. Something deeper. And you need to understand, Cole added, what that means. The line went silent. Danielle lowered the phone slowly. The sun felt warmer now, brighter, but somehow everything felt heavier, more real, more uncertain. She slipped the card back into her pocket, her mind racing. 3 o'clock, a diner, a conversation she couldn't predict. Danielle looked out at the street, at the people passing by, at the life she had known up until yesterday. And for the first time, it didn't feel the same. Because something had already started. Something she couldn't see yet. Something bigger than she understood. And whether she was ready or not, she was already part of it. The rest of the day moved differently. Not slower. Not faster. Just off. Danielle went back inside the laundromat, folding shirts and stacking towels like she always did. Her hands moved on instinct, muscle memory guiding every motion. But her mind wasn't there. It stayed somewhere between a rainy parking lot and a phone call she couldn't take back. 3 o'clock. A diner on 5th Street. She checked the clock more times than she could count. Each glance made the time feel heavier, more real, more inevitable. You keep staring at that clock, it ain't gonna move any faster. The voice came from behind her. Linda. Early 60s, gray hair tied back in a loose bun, kind eyes that had seen more than most people talked about. She had worked here longer than anyone, knew every regular by name, and had a way of noticing things people didn't say out loud. Danielle forced a small smile. Just tired, she said. Linda raised an eyebrow. Uh-huh, she replied, clearly not buying it. She leaned against the counter, arms folded. What happened last night? Danielle paused, her hands stilled on the stack of towels. She hadn't told anyone, hadn't planned to, but something about Linda made it harder to keep things locked inside. There was a guy, Danielle said slowly, out back at Walmart. Linda didn't interrupt, just listened. He collapsed, Danielle continued. Couldn't breathe. Nobody helped. Linda's expression softened slightly. And you did, she said. It wasn't a question. Danielle nodded. I used everything I had, she admitted. Bought medicine. Stayed with him until the ambulance came. Linda let out a quiet breath. Well, she said gently, sounds like you did the right thing. Danielle gave a faint, tired laugh. Doesn't feel like it right now. Linda studied her face. That's because doing the right thing usually costs something, she said. If it didn't, everybody would be doing it. Danielle looked down at her hands. Yeah, she whispered. I guess. Linda straightened up, giving her shoulder a light squeeze. You'll be all right, she said. You always are. Danielle nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed that today. At 2 p.m. she clocked out. The air outside was warm now, the rain completely gone. The streets were dry, but everything still carried that faint aftersmell of wet pavement and city air. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting the strap of her bag. Then she started walking. The bus ride to 5th Street felt longer than usual. Every stop, every turn, every second stretching the tension tighter inside her chest. She kept thinking about what Cole had said. You need to understand who you saved. What does that even mean? She wasn't expecting anything, didn't want anything. She had helped someone. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The bus slowed as it turned onto 5th Street. Danielle looked out the window and froze. Motorcycles. 2 of them. Parked across the street from a small diner with a faded sign that read Murphy's. 2 men stood near them, both wearing leather vests. both watching the street. Watching her. Her stomach tightened. The bus came to a stop. 5th Street, the driver called out. Danielle didn't move right away. Her fingers curled slightly against her bag. This was it. She could stay on the bus, ride past, pretend she never got the message. No one would force her. No one would come looking. She could walk away, just like everyone else had last night. Danielle swallowed. Then she stood up, stepped off the bus. The moment her feet hit the pavement, the air felt heavier. The 2 bikers noticed her immediately. One of them straightened slightly. The other nodded. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just acknowledgement. Danielle hesitated for half a second, then started walking toward the diner. Each step felt louder than it should have, the sound of her shoes against the pavement echoing in her ears. The closer she got, the more details came into focus. Chrome gleaming in the sunlight, leather worn from years of use, faces hardened by experience, but not hostile. Watching. Waiting. She reached the door. Her hand hovered over the handle. For a second, doubt crept in again. What am I doing? But then she remembered something. A man on the ground, struggling to breathe, and the moment she chose not to walk away. Danielle pushed the door open. The bell above it rang softly, and the entire room went silent. Inside, the diner looked like something out of another time. Red booths, checkered floor, a long counter lined with stools. But none of that mattered, because every seat was filled, and every person inside was a biker. Men and women, all ages over adulthood, all wearing some version of the same leather vest, all looking at her. The air felt thick, still, like she had just stepped into something she didn't understand. Danielle's heart pounded, hard, fast, but she didn't step back, didn't run. She stood there. Then a voice broke the silence. Danielle. She turned. Cole stood near the back, a small smile on his face. Glad you came, he said. Danielle let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Didn't feel like I had much of a choice, she replied. Cole chuckled softly. Fair enough. He gestured for her to follow. Come on, he said. He's been waiting. Danielle moved through the diner slowly, and as she walked past each table, something strange happened. One by one, they stood. Not all at once, but in a ripple, a wave, each biker rising to their feet as she passed. No words, no applause, just respect. Danielle's breath caught. She didn't understand it, didn't know what it meant, but she felt it. All the same. At the far corner of the diner, a man sat in a booth, older, broad-shouldered, a bandage visible beneath the collar of his shirt. His eyes lifted as she approached, and even before Cole spoke, she knew this was him. Hawk, alive, watching her, waiting. Danielle stopped at the edge of the table, the entire diner still silent behind her. Hawk studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stood. The movement wasn't easy. You could see it in the way his hand pressed briefly against the table. But he stood anyway, straightened, looked her in the eye. Danielle Brooks, he said quietly. Her name sounded different coming from him, like it carried weight now. Yeah, she replied softly. Hawk nodded once, and then he said something that made the room feel even quieter. I owe you my life. Danielle's heart skipped, because suddenly, this wasn't just about what she had done. It was about what it meant. And she had a feeling she still didn't understand the half of it. The diner remained silent, like the air itself was holding its breath. Danielle stood there, rain-dried clothes clinging slightly to her, her hands still at her sides, unsure what to do next. Every eye in the room was on her, but it didn't feel hostile. It felt expectant. Hawk motioned to the seat across from him. "Sit," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Danielle slid into the booth slowly, her movements careful, like she didn't want to disturb whatever this moment was. Cole took a step back, giving them space, but he didn't leave. He stayed close, arms folded, watching. Hawk lowered himself into his seat again, a slight wince crossing his face before he masked it. For a second, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the diner returned, but only faintly. Coffee cups settling on tables, a chair shifting, the low hum of a refrigerator behind the counter. Hawk studied her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. "You don't look like someone who had anything to spare," he said finally. Danielle let out a small breath. "I didn't," she answered honestly. A corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "I figured." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Old, worn at the edges. He placed it on the table between them. Danielle glanced down. It was a picture of 3 people, a younger version of Hawk, standing beside a woman with soft eyes and a quiet smile. Between them stood a young girl, no older than an adult threshold in appearance, perhaps early adulthood in the image's context, laughing, her arms wrapped around both of them. Danielle frowned slightly. "Your family?" she asked. Hawk nodded once. "My wife," he said, pointing gently, "and my daughter." His finger lingered on the girl in the photo. For a moment, something shifted in his expression, something deeper. "She got sick," he continued. "Years ago." Danielle didn't interrupt. "She needed treatment we couldn't get fast enough," he said. "By the time we had the money, it didn't matter anymore." The diner felt quieter somehow. Even the faint background noise seemed to fade. "I lost her," Hawk said simply. Danielle's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Hawk nodded again, but it wasn't in agreement. It was more like acknowledgement, like he had heard those words many times before. "I spent a long time being angry after that," he went on. "At the system, at people, at myself." Danielle leaned forward slightly, her hands clasping together on the table. "What changed?" she asked. Hawk looked at her. "You," he said. She blinked. "Me?" He nodded. "Not just you," he corrected, "but people like you." Danielle shook her head faintly. "I don't think I did anything that big." Hawk leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You had nothing," he said, "and you still chose to help someone everyone else walked away from." Danielle swallowed. "I didn't think about it like that," she admitted. "That's the point," Hawk replied. There was a pause. Then he continued. "Most people help when it's convenient, when it doesn't cost them anything, when it makes them look good." His voice stayed calm, steady. "You helped when it cost you everything." Danielle felt something shift in her chest, a mix of discomfort and something else she couldn't quite name. "You don't even know me," she said. Hawk nodded. "That's true," he said, "but I know enough." He gestured around the diner. "You see all this?" Danielle glanced around. The people, the vests, the presents. She nodded slowly. "I built something after I lost my family," Hawk said. "Not just this." He tapped the table lightly. "Something bigger." Danielle's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Hawk exchanged a quick look with Cole. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Those people out there?" he said. The ones you see as bikers? Danielle nodded. They're part of a network, he continued. A foundation. We help people who fall through the cracks, the ones no one else stops for. Danielle stared at him. You're serious? Cole stepped forward slightly. He's not just some guy on a bike, he said. Hawk funds everything. Housing, medical bills, community programs. Danielle blinked again. The words didn't quite land at first. You're saying, she started. Hawk finished it for her. I'm saying you didn't just save a random man last night. The air shifted again. He held her gaze. You saved someone who can change lives. Danielle felt her heart pick up speed. Not from fear this time. From something else. Something larger. You could have walked away, Hawk said, and nobody would have blamed you. She thought about that. About the attendant. The empty parking lot. The moment she chose to stay. But you didn't. Silence settled between them again. Heavy. Meaningful. Hawk reached into his jacket once more and pulled out a small envelope, placing it on the table. Danielle looked at it. Then at him. What's that? She asked. A start, he said. She didn't touch it. I didn't do it for money, she said quickly. Hawk nodded. I know. Then why? Because this isn't about paying you back, he interrupted gently. It's about making sure you don't have to struggle the same way tomorrow. Danielle's eyes dropped to the envelope again. Her fingers twitched slightly, but she didn't reach for it. Not yet. I don't want charity, she said quietly. Hawk's expression softened. Good, he replied, because that's not what this is. Another pause, then, come outside, he said. Danielle hesitated, then nodded. They both stood. As they walked through the diner again, something shifted. This time the people didn't just stand. Some of them nodded. Others gave quiet looks of respect. Danielle felt it again. That strange, unfamiliar weight. Not judgment, not fear. Something closer to recognition. She stepped outside and stopped. Because the street looked different now. Not just 2 motorcycles, dozens, lined up along the curb, more than she had seen when she arrived. Chrome shining in the afternoon sun. Engines quiet, but ready. Danielle turned to Hawk. What is all this? She asked. He looked out at the line of bikes, then back at her. This, he said, is what happens when people show up for each other. Danielle's breath caught, because for the first time, she started to understand. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to know. Last night hadn't been the end of something. It had been the beginning. And whatever came next was going to be bigger than anything she had imagined. Danielle didn't realize just how big until the next morning. It started as a low vibration, not a sound at first, a feeling. The kind that travels through the ground before it reaches your ears. Subtle at first, like distant thunder rolling across a flat Texas sky. She was standing in her kitchen, pouring the last of the milk into Marcus's cup, when the windows rattled slightly. Marcus paused mid-step. You hear that? He asked. Danielle frowned. Then it came again. Stronger. This time unmistakable. Engines, a lot of them. Not 1, not 2. Dozens. Maybe more. The sound grew rapidly, filling the air, bouncing off the buildings, crawling into every corner of the street like a storm that had decided to arrive without warning. Danielle moved toward the window slowly, her heart already starting to race. She pulled the curtain back and froze. Motorcycles. Everywhere. They poured into the street like a river of chrome and leather, engines rumbling deep and steady. Row after row, lining both sides of the road, filling every open space. Hundreds. There was no other way to describe it. Hundreds of bikes. Danielle's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God." Behind her, Marcus stepped up beside her. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. The street was changing. People were coming out of their apartments now, drawn by the noise. Doors opened, curtains shifted, faces appeared in windows. Confusion. Then fear. It spread fast. Missa. Carter from across the hall stepped outside, her robe tied tight, her eyes wide. "What is going on?" she demanded, looking around. A man from down the block, Mr. Rodriguez, walked into the street, shaking his head. "This ain't good," he said loudly. "This is not good." Another engine roared as more bikes pulled in, tightening the formation. They weren't scattered. They were organized, precise, intentional. Danielle felt her stomach drop. "They're here," she whispered. Marcus turned to her. "What do you mean they're here?" he asked sharply. She didn't answer right away, because she already knew. Deep down, she already knew. The knock on the door came next, sharp, urgent. Marcus moved immediately, stepping in front of her. "Stay back," he said quietly. He opened the door just enough to see who was there. It was Mrs. Carter. Her face was tight with worry. "Danielle," she said quickly, her voice low, "you need to tell me what's going on." Danielle stepped forward. Don't lie to me," Mrs. Carter cut in. "Word's already going around. Somebody saw you with them yesterday, at that diner." Danielle's chest tightened. Of course. Nothing stayed quiet in a neighborhood like this. "They're saying you brought them here," Mrs. Carter continued, "that you're mixed up in something." "That's not true," Danielle said quickly. "Then why are they here?" Mrs. Carter demanded. Danielle opened her mouth, closed it, because she didn't have an answer. Not one she could explain, not one that would make sense. Behind them, more voices began to rise. People gathering, talking, arguing, fear turning into something sharper, accusation. "You see all those bikes?" Mr. Rodriguez shouted from the street. "That's not normal. That's a gang." "Call the police," someone yelled. "They're going to bring trouble here." Danielle stepped outside slowly, the noise hitting her all at once. The engines, the voices, the tension. She stood on the edge of the sidewalk, her eyes scanning the street. The bikers had dismounted now, standing beside their machines, watching. Not aggressive, not chaotic, but present. And all of them seemed to be facing one direction. Her direction. Marcus stayed close behind her, his posture tight, protective. "If this is about yesterday," he said under his breath, "you need to tell me right now." Danielle swallowed. "I think it is," she admitted. Marcus let out a low curse. "You said it was just one guy." "I thought it was." Another voice cut through the noise. "Danielle!" She turned. Cole. He was walking toward her from the far end of the street, moving with purpose. His vest caught the light, the same crown with wings emblem visible on the back. The crowd parted slightly as he approached. People stepped aside, wary, unsure. Cole stopped a few feet in front of her. His expression wasn't tense. It wasn't threatening. But it was serious. "Morning," he said. Danielle stared at him. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Why are they here?" Cole glanced around at the crowd, at the fear, at the suspicion, then back at her. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said calmly. "That's not what it looks like," Marcus shot back. Cole nodded. "I get that," he said. "But that's not why we came." Danielle took a step forward. "Then why?" she asked. Cole didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past her, toward the line of bikes, towards something behind them. Danielle followed his gaze, and then she saw it. A black SUV pulling slowly into the street. It moved differently from the bikes. Slower, heavier, intentional. The engines around it quieted slightly as it passed, like the entire street was adjusting to its presence. The vehicle came to a stop, right in front of her building. The door opened, and for a second, everything went still. Hawk stepped out, alive, standing, stronger than the night before but still carrying the weight of what had happened. The crowd went silent, completely. No shouting, no whispers, just silence. Danielle felt her heart pound in her chest. Because this was the moment, the one she had been building toward without realizing it. Hawk looked around the street slowly, at the people, at the fear in their eyes, at the judgment. Then his gaze landed on Danielle and stayed there. He took a step forward, then another, until he stood just a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the faint lines of exhaustion still etched into his face, close enough that she could see something else too. Gratitude. Real. Unfiltered. "You didn't walk away," he said quietly. The words cut through the silence like something solid. Danielle felt her throat tighten. "No," she replied softly. Hawk nodded. Then he turned, not back to her, but to the crowd, to the neighborhood, to the people who had been whispering, judging, fearing. "You saw the jackets," he said, his voice carrying easily across the street. "The bikes, the symbols." No one spoke. No one moved. "You made your decision right there," he continued, "about who we are." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Hawk gestured toward Danielle, but she didn't. Danielle's breath caught. "She saw something else," he said. "Something none of you stopped to look for." The air felt different now, heavier, but not with fear, with something else, something building. Hawk looked back at her, then back at them. "Oh, and that, Kent," he said slowly, "is why we're here." Danielle's heart pounded, because whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. Everything was about to change. The silence on the street stretched longer than it should have. No one spoke. No one moved. The same people who had been shouting just moments ago now stood frozen, their eyes shifting between Hawk, the line of bikers, and Danielle. Confusion was still there, but something else had begun to creep in. Doubt. Hawk stepped forward, his boots hitting the pavement with a quiet, steady rhythm. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. He had everyone's attention. "You saw a threat," he continued, his voice calm but firm. "A gang. Trouble. Something to be afraid of." A few people glanced at each other. No one denied it. "Can't blame you," Hawk added, nodding slightly. "That's what the world tells you to see." Mr. Rodriguez shifted where he stood, arms crossed tighter now, but his voice came out less certain than before. "Then what is this?" he asked. "You don't bring hundreds of bikes into a neighborhood like this just to say hello." A faint ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Hawk turned toward him. "Fair question," he said. Then he gestured toward Cole. Cole stepped forward, pulling something from his jacket. A folder, thick, worn from use. He opened it, flipping it around so the nearest people could see. Photos, documents, stories printed on paper. "This," Cole said, his voice steady, "is what we do." The crowd leaned in slightly, curiosity replacing fear, just a little. "We're part of a foundation," Cole continued. "We help people who don't have anyone else to turn to." A woman from the back frowned. A foundation, she repeated skeptically. You expect us to believe that? Cole didn't react. Instead, he pulled out a photo and held it up. A family standing in front of a small house, smiling, relieved. This family was 2 weeks from losing their home, he said. Medical bills wiped them out. We paid it off. He flipped to another. A man standing beside a hospital bed, tears in his eyes. This one needed surgery. Couldn't afford it. We covered it. Another page. Another story. Another life changed. The murmurs started. Quiet at first, then growing. I've seen that logo, someone whispered. That crown. I've seen it online. Mr. Rodriguez stepped closer, squinting at one of the photos. Wait, he said slowly. This is Lily's legacy, isn't it? Cole nodded. Yes. The name hit the crowd like a wave, a shift, a crack in the fear. My cousin, a woman near the front said, her voice shaking slightly. In Dallas. They helped her when her husband got sick. Another voice chimed in. They paid for my brother's rehab program. That's them? No way. The energy on the street changed. Fast. Fear started giving way to recognition, and something even stronger. Realization. Hawk stepped forward again, letting the moment settle. 20 years, he said. That's how long we've been doing this. He looked around the neighborhood. At night, you see leather and engines, he said. You see something the world taught you to fear. Then he looked back at Danielle. But she didn't. Danielle felt her chest tighten. She didn't see a jacket, Hawk continued. She didn't see a symbol. He paused. She saw a man who needed help. The words landed hard, heavy, unavoidable. Mrs. Carter, who had been the loudest voice earlier, lowered her eyes slightly. Mr. Rodriguez exhaled slowly, shaking his head. I didn't know, he admitted. Hawk nodded. That's the problem, he said quietly. Most people don't take the time to know. He turned fully toward Danielle now. And that's why we're here, he said. Danielle's heart pounded. Not from fear anymore, but from something deeper. Something she couldn't quite name. Hawk reached into his jacket. This time he didn't pull out a photo or a folder. He pulled out an envelope, thicker than the one from the diner. He stepped closer and held it out to her. Danielle stared at it, then at him. What is this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A chance, Hawk said. She didn't move, didn't take it. I told you, she said quietly. I didn't do it for money. Hawk nodded. I know. Then why? Because this isn't about paying you back, he said gently. It's about making sure you don't have to struggle the same way anymore. Danielle's fingers trembled slightly at her sides. The crowd watched, silent, waiting. Hawk held her gaze. You gave everything you had to save someone you didn't know, he said. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask what you'd get in return. He took a small step closer. That kind of person doesn't get left behind. The words hit something deep inside her, something that had been quiet for a long time, something that had learned not to expect anything. Danielle slowly reached out. Her fingers touched the edge of the envelope. She hesitated, then took it. It felt heavier than it should have. She opened it carefully. Inside, a check. Her breath caught. The number didn't make sense at first. Too big, too unreal. $25,000, Hawk said quietly. The crowd gasped. Danielle's hands shook. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. I can't. Yes, you can, he said. She shook her head. This is too much. It's not enough, Hawk replied. Not for what you did. Silence fell again. But it was different now. Not tense, not fearful. Something softer, something shifting. Hawk reached into his jacket once more. Another paper. This one official, structured. He handed it to her. What's this? She asked, her voice unsteady. A job, he said. Danielle blinked. A what? Community outreach coordinator, he said, for Lily's legacy. The words hung in the air, heavy, unreal. Full salary, he continued. Benefits, stability. Danielle's mind struggled to catch up. You're serious? She whispered. Hawk nodded. I need people who understand what it means to struggle, he said. People who don't just see problems, but see people. Danielle felt something break open inside her, a wall she hadn't even realized she had built. I don't know if I can, she started. You can, Hawk said firmly, because you already did. Tears blurred her vision. The crowd was silent again, watching. But this time, not with fear, with respect. Hawk stepped back slightly. There's more, he said. Danielle let out a shaky breath. More? She asked. Hawk nodded toward the street. Take a look, he said. Danielle turned slowly. The bikers were moving now. Not leaving. Working. A truck pulled up behind them. Large. Loaded. The back doors opened. Boxes. Furniture. Supplies. Danielle's heart skipped. What is all this? She asked. Hawk smiled faintly. A start, he said again. Danielle turned back to him, her voice barely steady. Why me? Hawk looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something simple. Because you chose to see a human being, when everyone else chose to look away. Danielle's breath caught, and for the first time, she realized something. This wasn't luck. This wasn't random. This was a moment, a turning point. The kind that didn't just change one life, but everything around it. And standing there, in the middle of her street, surrounded by people who had feared what they didn't understand, Danielle knew nothing would ever be the same again. But change didn't come quietly. It never did. For a moment, the street held its breath, caught between what it had been just minutes ago and what it was becoming. Then everything broke loose. The murmurs turned into voices. Voices turned into movement. People stepped forward. Closer. Not away this time. Mr. Rodriguez was the first. He walked slowly toward Hawk, his earlier anger gone, replaced with something heavier. His hands hung at his sides, unsure, like he didn't quite know what to do with them anymore. He started, then stopped. His eyes flicked to Danielle, then back to Hawk. I thought, he tried again. I thought you were bringing trouble here. Hawk nodded once. I know, he said. Mr. Rodriguez swallowed. I was wrong. The words didn't come easily, but they came, and that mattered. Behind him, Mrs. Carter stepped forward next. Her voice, so sharp before, was quieter now. I said things, she admitted. About you, about her. She glanced at Danielle, shame written across her face. I shouldn't have. Danielle stood still, the envelope still in her hands, her mind trying to catch up with everything happening at once. This wasn't how things usually went. People didn't just change. Not like this. But something about the moment made it possible. Hawk looked around the street, at the faces, at the hesitation, at the weight of everything unspoken. We all judge, he said calmly. It's human. He gestured toward Danielle again. But growth? He added. That's a choice. Silence settled briefly. Then something unexpected happened. A younger woman stepped forward, mid-30s, tired eyes, arms crossed protectively over her chest. My sister, she said quietly. 2 years ago. She lost everything. House, job, health. She looked at Cole. You're telling me people like you help people like that? Cole nodded. That's exactly what I'm telling you. The woman's eyes filled slightly. Wish we'd known that back then, she whispered. Hawk took a step closer. It's not too late, he said. It never is. Something shifted again, this time deeper, stronger. The fear that had filled the street just minutes ago was gone. In its place, something warmer, something fragile. Hope. Behind Danielle, Marcus stepped forward. He had been silent this whole time, watching everything unfold, his instincts torn between protecting his sister and trying to understand what he was seeing. He looked at Hawk, then at the bikers, then at Danielle. You're telling me, Marcus said slowly, this all happened because she helped you last night. Hawk met his gaze. I'm telling you, he replied. This all happened because she chose to do the right thing when it was hardest. Marcus glanced at Danielle, really looked at her, at the way she held the envelope like she wasn't sure it was real, at the way her shoulders were still tense, like she hadn't fully let herself believe any of it. He let out a breath. You always do this, he said quietly to her. Danielle frowned. Do what? Show up for people, he said, even when you've got nothing left. Her throat tightened. I didn't think it would, she started. Change everything? Marcus finished. She nodded faintly. Marcus shook his head. That's the thing, he said. You never do. The moment lingered. Then the sound of movement pulled everyone's attention back. The truck, the one Hawk had pointed to earlier. The back doors were fully open now, and what was inside made the crowd go quiet again. Furniture, boxes of food, supplies, mattresses, everything neatly stacked, ready to be unloaded. Danielle's breath caught. No, she whispered. Hawk stepped beside her. Yes, he said gently. She turned to him. This is too much, she said, shaking her head. I can't take all of this. Hawk didn't argue, didn't push. He simply said, You didn't hesitate last night. Danielle blinked. What does that have to do with? It has everything to do with this, he said. He gestured toward the truck. You gave without asking what you'd get back, he continued. Now let someone give back without asking you to earn it. Danielle looked at the truck again, at the people starting to move, at the bikers stepping forward, not aggressively, but purposefully, organized, careful, respectful. They weren't taking over the street. They were helping. One by one, they began unloading boxes. A man with gray in his beard carried a mattress like it weighed nothing, setting it down gently near the entrance of Danielle's building. Another brought out crates of food, passing them to neighbors standing nearby. Someone else carried a small table, setting it carefully on the sidewalk. Danielle stood frozen, watching, trying to process. This doesn't happen, she whispered. Hawk glanced at her. It does, he said. You just don't see it enough. Marcus stepped closer to the truck, his eyes scanning the supplies. He let out a low whistle. Danielle, he said quietly. She didn't respond. She couldn't, because something inside her was breaking open, not painfully, but deeply. The kind of shift that changes how you see the world, how you see yourself. Mrs. Carter moved closer, her earlier fear completely gone now. "What can we do?" she asked. Hawk looked at her. A faint smile touched his face. "Help," he said simply. That was all it took. People stepped forward, hesitant at first, then more confidently. Neighbors who had been afraid just minutes ago now reached for boxes, for supplies, for anything they could carry. Mr. Rodriguez grabbed one end of a table. "I got this," he muttered. The younger woman from earlier took a crate of food, passing it carefully to someone behind her. Marcus picked up a box, glancing back at Danielle. "You coming?" he asked. Danielle hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, she stepped forward, her hands still trembling slightly as she reached for the nearest box. It was lighter than she expected. She carried it toward the building, set it down, turned back. And in that moment, she realized something. This wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about one decision, one act. This was something bigger, a ripple, spreading, changing not just her life, but everyone around her. Hawk watched her as she moved, a quiet understanding in his eyes. Cole stepped up beside him. "She's different," Cole said. Hawk nodded. "Yeah," he replied. "That's why she was worth finding." Cole glanced at the street, at the people working together, at the shift that had taken place. "All this," he said, "from $19. Hawk looked back at Danielle, at the way she moved now, not hesitant, but still grounded, still real. "No," he said quietly, "from a choice." The sun had fully broken through the clouds now. Light filled the street, warm, clear, and for the first time in a long time, Danielle Brooks didn't feel like she was just surviving. She felt like she was part of something, something real, something lasting. And as she set down another box, catching her breath, looking out at the people who had once doubted her now working beside her, she understood something she hadn't before. Kindness didn't just change moments. It changed people. And sometimes, it changed everything. The street didn't go back to normal. It transformed. What had started as fear turned into movement. What had been suspicion turned into cooperation. The same neighbors who had pulled their doors shut hours earlier were now standing shoulder to shoulder, passing boxes, carrying furniture, opening doors. Danielle stood in the middle of it all, her hands still trembling, not from fear anymore, but from disbelief. This couldn't be real, and yet it was happening right in front of her. Inside her apartment, the changes came even faster. The old couch, the one with the broken frame and sagging middle, was carried out carefully by two bikers and replaced with something solid, clean, and new. A real dining table followed, chairs that didn't wobble, shelves, a proper bed frame. Danielle walked slowly through the space, her fingers brushing against surfaces that didn't feel temporary, didn't feel fragile, didn't feel like they could fall apart at any moment. Marcus stood near the doorway, arms folded, watching everything come together. "Feels like we walked into someone else's place," he said quietly. Danielle let out a soft breath. "Yeah," she replied, "it does." But it wasn't someone else's place. It was hers. For the first time, it felt like it could actually be hers. Hawk stepped inside behind her, taking in the room with a quiet nod. "This is just the beginning," he said. Danielle turned to him, her eyes still searching for something solid to hold on to. "You keep saying that," she said, "but I don't understand how this is even possible." Hawk smiled faintly. "It's possible because people decide to make it possible," he said. He walked further into the apartment, stopping near the kitchen. "You spent years surviving," he continued, "stretching every dollar, carrying more than you should have had to carry." Danielle didn't respond, because he was right. "You don't have to do that anymore," he said. The words landed softly, but their weight was enormous. Danielle shook her head slightly. "I don't even know what that looks like," she admitted. Hawk turned to face her fully. "That's okay," he said. "You'll learn." He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a folder this time, thicker than the papers before. He handed it to her. Danielle took it slowly, opening it with careful hands. Inside were documents, details, a job description, salary, benefits, health coverage. Her breath caught. "This is real?" she asked quietly. Hawk nodded. "Starting in 2 weeks," he said. "You'll be working with us, helping people the same way you helped me." Danielle looked up at him. "Why me?" she asked again. Hawk didn't hesitate this time. "Because you already know how to care," he said. "That's not something you can teach." Danielle swallowed. Her eyes drifted back to the papers, numbers she had never seen attached to her name before, stability she had never experienced. Marcus stepped closer, glancing over her shoulder. "Full benefits?" he said, surprised. Hawk nodded. "Medical included," he added. "Everything." Marcus froze for a second, then looked at Danielle. "You hear that?" he said quietly. Danielle nodded. She heard it. But more than that, she felt it. For the first time in years, the constant pressure in her chest, the quiet fear that followed her every day, started to loosen. Just a little. Hawk watched her carefully. "I'm not just offering you a job," he said. "I'm offering you a chance to build something." Danielle frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Hawk stepped back, gesturing toward the window. "Come here," he said. She followed him. Outside, the street was still alive with movement. Boxes being carried, people talking, bikers and neighbors working side by side. Hawk pointed further down the block. A vacant lot, overgrown, unused. "You see that?" he asked. Danielle nodded. "Yeah, that's going to change," he said. She looked at him. "How?" Hawk's eyes held something steady. "Community center," he said. "Food programs, job training, medical support. A place people can come when they have nowhere else to go." Danielle's breath caught. "Here?" she asked. "Here," he confirmed. She shook her head slightly. "That kind of thing doesn't happen in places like this." Hawk smiled faintly. "It does now." He paused, then added, "And it's going to have your name on it." Danielle blinked. "What?" "Clark House," he said. She let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "No," she said quickly. "No, you can't do that." "Why not?" Hawk asked. "Because I didn't do anything special," she replied. Hawk stepped closer. His voice lowered slightly. "You gave everything you had to save a stranger," he said. "That's the definition of special." Danielle's throat tightened. She didn't have an answer for that. Outside, the sound of laughter drifted in through the open window. Real laughter. The kind she hadn't heard in this building in a long time. Marcus leaned against the wall, watching her. "You gonna say no to all this?" he asked. Danielle looked at him, then at Hawk, then back at the papers in her hands. Everything she had known, everything she had accepted as normal. It was all shifting, right now, in front of her. "I don't know how to be this person," she admitted quietly. Hawk nodded. "Good," he said. She frowned. "Good?" "Because it means you won't forget who you were," he explained. The words settled deep. Danielle looked down at her hands, at the folder, at the life she had been holding together with nothing but determination and exhaustion. Then she looked up again, at Hawk, at Marcus, at the street outside. at the people who had once doubted her now building something with her. She took a slow breath, then nodded. "Okay," she said. Hawk smiled. Not big, not dramatic, just quiet, satisfied. "Good," he said. Outside, the sun continued to rise higher, filling the street with light. And inside that small apartment, for the first time in years, Danielle Brooks wasn't just surviving. She was stepping into something new, something bigger, something that didn't just change her life, but gave her the power to change others. And that was only the beginning. 6 months passed, not in a blur, not in a rush, but in steady, undeniable change. The kind you feel in small moments before you fully understand how big it really is. The kind that rewrites a life quietly, until one day you look up and realize everything is different. Danielle stood at the edge of the newly paved lot, the Texas sun warming her face as she looked out at something that once felt impossible. Clark House. The name sat bold across the front of the building, clean white letters against a deep brick wall. The structure stood strong where an empty, forgotten lot used to be. Glass doors, fresh paint, wide windows that let light pour into every corner. Life filled the space now. People moved in and out, some carrying paperwork, others holding bags of groceries, some just standing and talking like they finally had somewhere to be, somewhere to belong. Danielle adjusted the folder in her hands, her reflection briefly catching in the glass as she walked toward the entrance. She barely recognized herself, not because she looked different, but because she stood differently. Stronger, steadier, like the ground beneath her feet had finally stopped shifting. Inside, the building buzzed with quiet purpose. A woman at the front desk greeted her with a warm smile. "Morning, Danielle." "Morning," she replied. Her voice felt natural here now, like it belonged. She moved through the space past the job training room where a small group sat listening to a volunteer explain resume building, past the food pantry, where shelves that used to sit empty were now lined with supplies. Real help, real change. Not promises, not maybes. Marcus stood near the back office, talking to a man in his 40s. He held a clipboard now, his posture more relaxed than she had ever seen it before. When he spotted her, he gave a small nod. She nodded back. No words needed. They both knew what this place meant. For them. For everyone. Danielle stepped into her office, a small but clean space with a desk, a chair, and a window that looked out onto the street where everything had started. She set the folder down and paused, just for a moment, letting it all sink in. Her eyes drifted to the corner of the desk. A small frame sat there. Inside it, the receipt from that night. $19. Faded slightly, but still clear. She had kept it, not because of what it cost, but because of what it meant. A knock came at the door. Danielle looked up. "Come in." A woman stepped inside, mid-30s, tired eyes, shoulders slightly hunched, like she had been carrying too much for too long. Danielle recognized that look. She had worn it herself. "Hi," the woman said softly. "They told me to ask for Danielle?" Danielle smiled gently. "You found her," she said. "Come in. Sit down." The woman hesitated, then stepped forward, lowering herself into the chair. "I don't really know where to start," she admitted. Danielle leaned forward slightly, her voice calm. "Start anywhere," she said. "I'm listening." The woman took a breath. "My car broke down last week," she said. "Lost my job because I couldn't get there. Rent's due in 5 days. I've been trying to figure it out, but..." Her voice cracked. I'm running out of options. Danielle didn't interrupt, didn't rush. She just listened. Fully. Completely. When the woman finished, silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just real. Danielle reached into her bag slowly, pulled out her wallet. She paused for a second, her fingers brushing against the cash inside. Then she pulled out a folded bill. $50. She placed it gently on the desk. The woman stared at it. I can't take that, she said quickly. Danielle smiled softly. Yeah, she said. You can. The woman's eyes filled slightly. But I don't even know you. You don't have to, Danielle replied. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a card. The same design, crown with wings. She slid it across the desk. When you're back on your feet, Danielle said, help someone else. The woman's hand trembled as she took both the money and the card. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Danielle leaned back slightly. You don't, she said. The woman looked confused. Danielle smiled. You pass it on. The words hung in the air, simple, but powerful. The woman nodded slowly, like something had just clicked into place. Okay, she said. I will. She stood clutching the money and the card and walked out of the office. Danielle watched her go. For a moment the room was quiet again. Then another voice came from the doorway. You're getting good at that. Danielle turned. Hawk stood there, leaning slightly against the frame, arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face. Learning from the best, she replied. He chuckled softly. I don't know about that, he said. He stepped inside, his gaze drifting briefly to the framed receipt on her desk. Still holding on to that? He asked. Danielle followed his gaze. Yeah, she said. Feels like I should. Hawk nodded. Good, he said, because that's where all this started. Danielle looked at him. No, she said quietly. It started before that. He raised an eyebrow. How so? She thought about it. About the parking lot, the rain, the choice. It started the moment I decided not to walk away, she said. Hawk held her gaze, then nodded slowly. Exactly, he said. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the center filling the background, voices, movement, life. Hawk looked out the window, at the street, at the people coming and going. You changed more than your life, he said. Danielle shook her head slightly. No, she replied. We did. Hawk smiled. Fair enough. Outside, the sun shined brighter now, casting long shadows across the pavement. The same street, the same place. But nothing about it felt the same anymore, because something had shifted. Something had grown. And it all came back to one moment. One choice. A woman with nothing left, who decided to give anyway. Danielle leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting once more to the receipt. $19. That was all it took. Not to buy something, not to change the world, but to prove something simple. That kindness, real kindness, doesn't wait until you have enough. It shows up when you don't. And sometimes, that's exactly what changes everything. Danielle Brooks didn't have anything left that night. Just $19 and a choice in a dark parking lot. But she still chose to stay, to kneel in the rain, and to hold a stranger's hand when everyone else walked away. That's the thing about real courage. It doesn't show up when life is easy. It shows up when you have every reason to walk away, and you don't. Next time you see someone struggling, don't overthink it. Just pause, just ask, just show up, because that's all Danielle did, and it changed more than one life. You don't need to have everything to give something. You just need to be willing in that moment. If this story touched you, comment 1 below. And tell me, have you ever helped someone when it cost you something real? Stay with me, because the next story might change the way you see a moment like that forever.